You're saving money, not casually, deliberately. You hesitate before spending. You think twice before buying. You say no more often than you say yes. And over time, your bank balance starts to grow. Slowly at first, then a bit more consistently. And from the outside, that should feel like progress. But something doesn't sit right. Because even as the number increases, your life doesn't feel any different. You're still thinking about money, still calculating, still adjusting, still asking yourself, can I afford this? And that's where the confusion begins. Because the expectation was simple: if you save enough, things should get easier. But for some reason, they don't. Saving money has always been positioned as the starting point. Earn more than you spend. Keep the difference. Repeat consistently. And eventually, you move forward. It sounds logical, because keeping more money should improve your position. It should create distance between you and financial stress. And in some ways, it does. You feel more stable, more in control, less reactive. But that improvement has a limit. And that limit isn't obvious at first, because saving gives the appearance of progress without actually changing the system underneath. Saving money creates protection. It builds a layer between you and unexpected problems. A car repair, a medical bill, a sudden expense you didn't plan for. Without savings, those moments create pressure instantly. Decisions become urgent. Options become limited. But with savings, those same situations feel manageable. You can respond instead of react. And that's valuable, because it removes instability. But here's the part that often goes unnoticed. Saving doesn't move you forward. It stops you from falling backward. And those are two very different things. There's a point where saving starts to slow down, not because you're doing less, but because there's less room to improve. You've already cut unnecessary spending. You've already become efficient. You've already built discipline. And at that stage, every additional dollar saved requires more sacrifice than the last, which means progress becomes harder to maintain. And eventually, you reach a ceiling, not a hard stop, but a gradual slowdown, where effort increases, but results don't accelerate. There's also something subtle that happens at this stage. The more disciplined you become, the less flexibility you feel, because every decision starts to carry weight. Spending feels like a step backward. Saving feels like the only safe move. And over time, that creates a kind of tension, where money is no longer just a tool. It becomes something you constantly manage. Every purchase is evaluated. Every decision is calculated, not out of fear, but out of habit. And while that builds control, it also reinforces a system where progress depends entirely on restraint. This is where the deeper problem shows up. Saving operates inside a closed system. Money comes in, expenses go out, and whatever remains stays with you. But nothing inside that system creates growth. There's no expansion, no multiplication, no output beyond what you put in. And that's the key limitation, because accumulation is not the same as growth. You can accumulate for years and still feel like you're in the same place. Saving creates visible change. The number increases. The balance improves, and that creates a sense of movement. But movement can be misleading, because movement suggests direction, not speed. You can be moving forward very slowly, while believing you're making meaningful progress. And over time, that gap becomes noticeable. because the effort is consistent, but the outcome feels delayed. Saving depends on time, long periods of repetition, doing the same thing over and over again, month after month, year after year. And while that builds something, it builds it slowly, because every dollar saved comes from effort, a decision not to spend, a choice to delay, a constraint. And constraints don't scale easily. You can only restrict yourself so much before it starts to affect how you live. Imagine this over a longer timeline. 5 years of saving, 10 years of consistency, always doing the right thing, always being careful. At the end of that period, you built something meaningful. But when you compare that result to the time and effort it required, the return often feels smaller than expected, not because saving failed, but because saving scales slowly. It grows in a straight line, and straight lines take time to cover distance. This is where it starts to feel frustrating. You're doing everything right, being responsible, being disciplined, avoiding unnecessary risk. And yet, the result doesn't match the effort. You expected progress, but what you got was stability. And stability over time can start to feel like stagnation, not because nothing is happening, but because nothing is changing. What's missing is leverage, a way for money to operate independently of your time, something that allows it to generate output on its own. Because without that, progress remains tied to effort. And effort has limits, time has limits, energy has limits. So if everything depends on you, growth will always be constrained. Think about the difference this creates. If your entire system depends on effort, then stopping effort stops progress. Income pauses, savings pause, everything pauses. But when money begins to work, even in a small way, that dependency starts to break. Progress continues, even when you're not actively pushing it forward. And that's a completely different system, one that doesn't rely entirely on you. At some point, money has to change roles, from something you protect to something you deploy, from something you store to something you position. And that shift is where the system changes. Because now, money is no longer passive. It's active. It begins to contribute, even in small amounts, even inconsistently. But once that starts, the dynamic is different. This is where many people stop, not because they lack discipline, but because they reached stability and assumed that was enough. They built savings, they reduced risk, they created control, but they never transitioned into growth. And without that transition, the system stays the same, reliable, but limited. Momentum begins when money starts working, when it produces something, without requiring constant effort. Even a small return changes the structure, because now, progress is not entirely dependent on you. And over time, that difference compounds. Slowly at first, almost unnoticeably, but eventually, it begins to matter. And this is where expectations need to adjust. Because the goal is not just to save more, it's to reach a point where saving is no longer the primary driver, where it becomes the starting point, not the entire strategy. Because once that transition happens, progress no longer feels forced. It becomes gradual, more natural, more sustainable. Saving money is not the problem. It's a necessary step. It creates stability. It protects your position. But it is not a complete strategy, because saving alone cannot create momentum. It cannot scale. It cannot expand your position over time. And that's the difference between staying where you are and actually moving forward. Because real progress begins when money stops being something you hold and starts becoming something that works. If this helped you see the structure more clearly, subscribe to Capital Explained for more deep, analytical breakdowns. Thanks for watching.